And joining me on the podcast and on video, it's John and his interesting background of his office there. It's everything in there. It's a world of stories there, a lifetime of stories from John's many travels around the world. You know, John, mining analyst, John Meyer, this is mining analyst, partner at SP Angel. You know, John.
Yeah, thank you.
How is your office for keeping the warmth out? And because it's the hottest day of the year, apparently.
Well, I did tempt fate and buy an air conditioning unit about 6 months ago when they were cheap. Now I've got to, but unfortunately the air conditioning unit's a little bit bigger than I had anticipated. But I will be dragging it up the stairs later on today.
Yeah. How big is it?
I think it weighs about 30 kilos.
You can lift
and
that, John.
it's a reasonable size.
Put your weightlifting belt on, you'll be fine. And of course, the weightlifting uniform you wear, like those, skin tight, like almost like the cycling shorts and stuff, and the vest, and just get it up there. There we are. There's a picture for the video. Anyway, let's talk about macro news, John. People have been watching it, and I've seen it. I got an alert on the chart about gold hitting an all-time high, pretty much. It has come off a little bit, but nevertheless, let's share this with you. Share the screen here. There we are. Let's get rid of that. And it's come off to this in the last few sessions, about 3%. But nevertheless, we're still towards that top of the range on the previous resistance. So it's still looking strong, isn't it? I'm assuming it's just down to central. Who's buying this? Maybe China, of course. But I mean, also it's down to the central banks about to ease, aren't they all?
Well, what we think at the moment is it's just algorithmic selling. So there are substantial funds within commodity trading groups, and they use a lot of computerized programs to buy and sell, literally just to gamble on commodity markets. And we think the recent rise in gold prices has triggered a bunch of these systems to just sell into the market. Now, they may be short selling. They may have gone long and then be unwinding those positions. We would expect, following the recent run in gold, for there to be some forward selling by gold producers, because if you're producing gold, it's a fantastic margin to lock into. There may be some selling by central banks, particularly with a view to the US dollar weakening. So, for example, if you wait for the dollar to weaken and then you sell the gold price, you're then having to convert your US dollars, having sold the gold, back into your local currency. And if your local currency's gone up against the US dollar, then that's not so great for you. So there may be some central bank activity, although we're not aware of it. But they don't normally go around banging the drum as to what they're doing. We find out afterwards.
Yeah.
But I think there's still ongoing buying activity. Well, we're expecting ETFs, as in more normal investors, to come back into the market buying ETFs. We're pretty sure the Chinese have been buying quite a lot in the futures markets, in physical gold. We know the Indians buy quite a lot. Usually if they have a decent harvest, they start buying a lot of gold in anticipation of the Indian wedding season. Those sorts of things are quite big drivers in the market. So yeah, it's very interesting. And although this is shall we say, an unexpected pullback since yesterday, I'm not sure it's not the end of the market. I think it's got more to run. It just seems to be remarkably solid as a market. It's got good momentum in it.
Yeah, no, I think if you've seen gold previously, historically, when it's made new highs, yeah, it does have pullbacks, but it does go back on to making new highs. Like, I mean, if you look from 2019, to how much that run up from the bottom there, it did like 73%. I'm thinking and it literally tried its best to get above that 2000 from 2020, like that all the way up to pretty much 2024, March this year. It's made a big run. So I think this is a range now. This is a new range. And it may come back into this range, but I think it's going to pump back out. I'm saying that $3,000, John, that's the target, 2.5 first. But I mean, I think it goes on multi-year runs, isn't it? But gold, when it starts moving, And I think this is the start of, like I said, from 2009, 2018 to 2020, 2 years there. And we've only just started. It started rallying, it broke out in March. So I'm thinking a couple of years you give this, because the central banks, like I said, are reducing interest rates. Hard assets are going to do well, aren't they? So very interesting, actually. I just read, I didn't know this. When Gordon Brown sold all the gold off at the low, pretty much. I don't know where he sold that. But it turns out now that the government, Richard Reeves in charge of this, have 3 billion of Bitcoin because it's been seized from criminals. And I think, again, would you sell that off? I don't know. It could go a lot higher. That's the thing, isn't it? But selling gold off was, in hindsight, was a very bad thing. But no, I think this is a multi-year run. It's just the start of a multi-year run in gold because, like I said, currency is going to be devalued pretty much, and hard assets will rally. We're going to have pullbacks, of course. I mean, look at the pullbacks recently. Since it hit this new range, you had a pullback here of a similar amount, and it's still rallied back up and broke new levels. So I think this is a healthy little pullback. But John, you heard it here first, probably not. It's going to go on a multi-year run, gold, I think.
Well, it's been on a multi-year run for the last several thousand years, Justin.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's the original Bitcoin, isn't it? So
is it a question of 3 steps forwards and 2 steps back, or 3 steps forwards and 1 step back?
Yes, whichever way it pans out, I think it's a net gain. It's a net step forward. So happening here. So you're right there. So okay.
Well, gold, I always think of gold is a currency, but it's a currency that's not controlled by any government. It's controlled by how much do people want to own it, and that's normally determined by how much do they distrust government. Money that's printed by governments.
Yeah, I'm sure that's exactly the argument for Bitcoin, though, isn't it? People say that's it's a limited supply, which gold is as well. It gets harder to mine. All the stuff has been mined, I assume, so far. So the supply is very constrained, and then you get when you get central banks cutting interest rates, you get people getting gold. And also, like you say, in China, people like that, the real estate's gone. They don't trust stock markets, it's tanked. So they're going for gold, aren't they? And so everyone's these safe haven assets are like Bitcoin. So some mad pullbacks. But yeah, so it is like I said, it's the old school Bitcoin. That's what people will be saying.
It's a remarkably similar argument, that's for sure.
Yeah. That's what people be saying about gold. When most youngsters are, doing Bitcoin, so well, this is old school. Gold will come back into favor again. It's old school Bitcoin. Okay, so that's you're going to mention something else, macro wise. China.
Yes, in China they've had the third plenum, as it's called, where the government gets together. This is the top brass of the Chinese Communist Party. They get together and they decide where they think the economy should go, what are the key issues. And we know the key issues are fixing the housing market, getting more people from villages into the town, so ongoing urbanization. One of their key things is that housing is for living in and not for speculation. I've got to say I completely agree with that. Yeah. It's quite nice to have a bit of investment in housing, but frankly, it should be more for living in than for anything else. And they're working on that. Of course, they've got a bit of an issue, as it's not unique to China, because they had the single child policy for a long time. Now they've scrapped that, but unfortunately the birth rate isn't looking that great in China. So they've got a demographic time bomb coming at them in future years, and they need to make everybody feel a bit happier so that they have more children. Now we're going a little bit off topic here, but the government is definitely working in that kind of direction. And at the same time, having had this plenum, we know that they are very focused on transforming industry into high-tech industries. They want to build out certain things, like they want to strengthen their military. Not sure really why they need to do that, but they feel the need to do that. And I suspect they're still going to build more infrastructure. And we haven't seen any major pronouncements on that, but we're expecting the Chinese People's Daily and various other papers to start covering stories on what the government is planning on doing. And yes, I think the market is looking forward to a bit more new infrastructure spend.
Yeah. Well, look at this. This is some economic data this week from China. House prices year on year to June, minus 4.5%. That's a little bit worrying, isn't it? And previously it was 0.39%. So you see the problem there with, like I said, so many banks now are embroiled in this. It's a little bit worrying, like you said, where it's going to go. But GDP year on year to quarter two is 4.7, forecast at 5.1. Previous was 5.3, so from 5.3 to 4.7. And this is, again, the trend is accelerating, it seems. GDP quarter on quarter to Q2, it was forecast coming in at 1.1. It came in at 0.7. Previously, it was 1.5, so it's halved. So you can see there's an issue here, isn't it? Chinese growth. And like I said, with China, pretty much, they suck up half the world's commodities, pretty much. That's a
If
little
that
bit
happened,
worrying.
if you saw that in the US, you'd see the unemployment figures go up a lot. In China, what tends to happen is I think the unemployment figures rise less quickly, but salaries are quite often linked to factory output. So it does have a very quick and very direct impact on the money, so the available money for spending, and therefore what people can spend on buying new properties. And for those of us who are old enough to remember, the UK had lots and lots of problems when we had negative equity. I think we were talking about the early 90s, where we had a bit of negative equity in the UK, and it starts to cause a knock-on impact on the banking sector, because they don't want to be throwing people out of houses and then selling those houses for less money than the mortgages are worth.
Yeah.
That doesn't, in fact, I'd say that is socially unacceptable these days. And I hope it would be unacceptable in China as well.
Wow, who knows? There's lots of things that are acceptable in China that we wouldn't think is acceptable here. Look at this. Look at retail sales. That is worrying. So the previous year on year to June, 3.7% was previous. Forecast, where's the forecast? 3.3, it's down to 2%. That's nearly halved. You can see, but even by, I don't know if it's seasonality or whatever, but this is year on year. That is a big drop in people's spending. Now you extrapolate that across 1.5 billion people, or say half the population, adults. So 700 million people spending less. That's a lot less produced, a lot less commodities needed, everything, resources needed. That's a little bit worrying, isn't it? So regardless of whether they keep employed, which employment stayed at 5%, people are spending less.
That tells you there's a large loss of confidence
Yeah.
in the country. It says that people are holding back some cash because they really are worried that things are going to go a bit wrong. Now, it's difficult to know what could go wrong. Is there going to be are they going to have a banking crisis caused by property? When I spoke to Capital Economics, who I think know a lot more about economics than I do, their view was no, it would just take about 10 years for it all to unwind and get fixed. But
Yeah.
how much pain do you take in the process, and does it cause other problems? If it falls over into a banking crisis, then clearly it's a bigger event. But in the meantime, China Inc., shall we say, is pressing ahead, full steam ahead on electric vehicles. I've been talking to somebody in Beijing last night who's been talking to the buyers of battery-based raw materials, lithium, cobalt, those sorts of things. They are restocking, getting ready for, shall we say, a big year-end push for sales. But they are concerned that outside the normal buying sprees for electric vehicles, for example, or for other major consumer products, that things might be a bit soft. And as you've been pointing out, retail sales are soft. And so they are being a little bit cautious about their restocking at the moment.
Yeah. Well, that is, I mean, if you look at the more, recent updates or sort of quarter on quarter, that is terrible. Literally GDP half pretty much of quarter on quarter. And they said, and even pretty much retail sales, that's reflected in that confidence, going down. They got an issue there. I mean, the problem is, like you say, these banks who are embroiled in debt, How does the government get stimulate, consumer demand again if everyone's lost property or feeling poor and there's banks there I assume who can't loan now or are restricted in loaning because they've got so much debt and then the government's going to have to say you're going to have to loan so in the end what are the government going to do just issue I don't know how they have to raise money won't they I don't know how they do it because they are
The government's quite
they're
good at
backed into the corner here a little bit I mean they do absorb it China I know it might take longer but again, how does that affect the rest of the world? Like you say, it's growth, isn't it? Because if China is not demanding, if they're not consuming at the high level they've previously been consuming, then it affects the entire global economy.
and they've definitely been pushing ahead on export markets. So they continue to export more. In fact, Japan was also exporting more in terms of value, although not in terms of volume. So everybody's trying to raise the value of their exports. Question then is who's going to buy all this stuff? Are the Americans going to carry on soaking up this enormous amount of manufacturing in China and Japan, or will Trump come into power and suddenly raise the drawbridges as new tariff man, as he likes to call himself sometimes? We know the EU. Well, whether we raise tariffs in the EU or not is an interesting point. The fact is, the buying power of the EU isn't what it was, and until the war in Ukraine is finished, it's unlikely to pick up very much.
Yeah, do you know what? Like I said, a good read, on China's economies is often looking at the copper price, isn't it? And that's come off quite a bit. So, I mean, not a closing high, but it's come off 18% in the last 63 days. So that's a little bit concerning, isn't it? It's sort of going
That
back down.
that
I mean,
that is an unexpected and disappointing move, and yeah, it says that there's slightly less economic activity going on. There's levels have been building within the official warehouses at the LME, COMEX and Shanghai. Or COMEX has been less, but they've had troubles with bringing shipments in. Now, there may be a degree of market manipulation in here. We know the Chinese government wants commodity prices to be low. That helps to keep inflation down for them. But at some stage, they will have to go up. I mean, if the dollar goes down, commodity prices normally go up in dollar terms.
yeah. Okay, let's talk some individual companies, John. Talking about gold and all that, copper, whatever it is. Solgold. Where's their operations based again?
Solgold are in Ecuador, which is Latin America. So if you go up the coast of Latin America, you've got Chile at the bottom. You go through Peru, and you get to Ecuador before you get to Colombia. So it's on the Andean ridge. So there's a lot of copper mines all the way up the mountain chain there, and so copper mines don't, or copper deposits don't respect borders. The huge copper mines in Chile and Peru, of course, are almost certainly going to extend into Ecuador. Now, Ecuador's a slightly riskier country in terms of just it's less well known for mining than Peru and Chile. It is more on the socialist side of things, but there is a mining convention that companies seem to be able to work with. And Solgold this week on Monday financed $750 million worth of gold offtake. So that's pretty good news. They've got the project capex, the capital cost of the Cascabel project, at $1.55 billion US. So 750 million, in theory, gets them halfway there. So that's fantastic news from a project perspective. And of course, building these things isn't quite as easy as financing them. Although, shall we say, quite often financing is more difficult than building. But it would be great to see this project get financed and get started, and that is a very important and significant move. And I should say that we act as broker to Solgold. We worked with them for many, many years.
Yeah, the chart is looking quite good. It's if you look at that, so let's get rid of the 50-day moving average there. There's a 200-day moving average. It spikes above that. It's been going down. It spiked a couple of times. Not really close above it now. you see this level here at what 1088. It spiked up that a couple of times. It's now just closed above that today. It's above the 200-day moving average, a gap above that. And in fact, you've got the 50-day crossing, which is often known as the golden cross. That's looking quite good. I'd say that definitely at bottom in at 6 there. And maybe the start of an uptrend there on Solgold.
Yeah, if you want some exposure to gold and copper, it's one of the world's largest discoveries in for many, many years. In fact, probably the largest discovery. Well, I'm thinking how to compare it against the Ivanhoe discovery at Kamoa-Kalula in the DRC, but it's certainly a very, very big project. It's in the world top 10, and it's a project that can be larger. They've had various iterations of the feasibility study. And so what they've done more recently is they've pulled back the scale at which they plan of the project to something that is more reasonable and sensible from a financing perspective. So now that they've effectively secured the money for half the capex, let's hope they can bring in the other half.
Yeah, look at that. That level there, it's twice in the last few days. It's trying to break that 11.26, 11 pence 26 there. If you scroll back, right, you can see big dips to this level, almost previous support, and in fact, previous resistance there. This is almost where they IPO'd. Oh no, sorry, it wasn't the IPO because but it's spiked out. This level here is very significant. If it gets above this level and closes, it's a good sign because they bounced off it several times, or they've had resistance here several times. So I'm saying that a nice break above that could see a start of uptrend. Check it out on the chart. What else are you going to mention, John? Let's go into your thing here. Oh, Bushveld. This used to be a favourite of yours, John. I mean, your new favourite seems to be Cornish metals now, of course, but Bushveld, used to love a bit of Bushveld. And what's happened here?
Well,
You
I
haven't
mean, if we
mentioned it for a
remember,
while.
Bushveld is incredibly sensitive to the South African rand and to the vanadium price.
What
And
a
in fact, if
combo,
we
eh?
look,
Fancy being the Rand and Vanadium. That is a combination incentive to those two. Wow.
yes, and the rand never seems to weaken as much as we think it should, despite all the troubles that they've had in South Africa over the last sort of 20 years. And the general malaise in its economy. But Eskom, the power utility, seems to be working better than it was, which is great. The new government, the Government of National Unity, which is a coalition between the ANC and the DA, the Democratic Alliance, looks like it could. Well, I think we're all hopeful that better things will happen within the economy as a result. And also the vanadium price is picking up, which is nice. I'm not saying it's picking up a lot, and I'm not saying the Bushveld is out of the woods yet. The news earlier this week was that a couple of the directors, the CEO Craig Coltman, who's been doing a fantastic job, I think, on keeping the company together. Although he's been selling off one of the assets, unfortunately, but I think he's steering the ship. And if the vanadium price picks up a bit more, then hopefully Craig will get a good return on his money.
Yeah. So he's been buying a few, is he? Okay. So what I mean, I assume they've got problems with a debt issue, have they? They got a lot of debt there now.
Yeah, they took on a certain amount of debt in order to effectively build out production. And problem is vanadium prices kept falling and falling. And it's just very, very difficult to run a business in a low vanadium price environment. And you can't get away from that. It's a tough business.
My word, it's showing here. Listen. They've lost 98% of its value since 2018. 98%. They're now a 14 million market cap. Is that right? 14 million market cap.
Justin, but
And
you're forgetting how much value they created
yeah. Oh yeah,
before.
on the way up. This is why so many people follow them because on the way up, I mean, if you look at that, like, I'm going the other way around. They did about 4,000%. I think share price rise. So you can see why there's a huge amount of interest here. Um, three, 2,500 in literally from 2016, 2018. they rose by 2,500% pretty much. But we're looking now, like you said, they're expanding too much. They got the 14 million market cap, net debt of $105 million. How do you get out of that?
Well, if anyone can get out of it, Craig Coltman can. So that's as far as I'm going to
go. You love that. You should pass this on to him. If anyone,
go. We
Craig can.
we do act as nomad and broker. I should add that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Last one then, John. Also in the in the gold and copper space, I suppose, is Anglo-Asian Mining. A double AZ is ticker, and this is running nice as well. It's picked up with that above 200 moving averages, golden cross happening, and a nice little rally there. What's happening there, John?
Well, I think that's helped by rising gold prices. I mean, they are a gold producer. Gold production is less than what it was because the tailings dam, well, the putting material into the tailings dam was suspended. They need to raise that tailings dam, which is something I'm sure they'll do, and they are waiting for that suspension to be lifted. The government has pronounced that it will be that they will lift the suspension, but we hadn't actually seen the actual lifting of it yet. So company's still waiting, but in the meantime, they are still able to produce gold and silver and a little bit of copper. It's not as much as it was. They produced 4,700 ounces in the first half. That's against 14,500 ounces a year ago. So yeah, unfortunately, production is down. They've also got another project, a new project that's come to them called Damuli, that they are looking to develop, and that could give them about 20,000 ounces of copper production on an annualized basis, starting perhaps in about 12 months' time. So that's something to look forward to, and I think that's something that it would be extremely value generating. But in the meantime, yes, we're waiting on news from the government of Azerbaijan to lift that suspension on the tailings dam, and then I think we'll be off to the races. And as I say, we act as a nomad and broker to Anglo-Asian Mining.
Isn't it funny how some stocks just, capture the imagination of retail investors, others don't. Like if you look at Anglo-Asian Mining, right? It outperformed, from 2016 to 2018, when Bushveld was on the run, it did 4,700%. That's an unbelievable rise, isn't it? And it's come off it. So it's not as popular as Bushveld, but it's outperformed Bushveld. In fact, I just got an alert on Solgold there. I set an alert on it, and look at that. It's trying to pump above that, John. It's trying to get above there. It's moving up. That's a nice little high there.
Well, I think
yeah.
we've been through a period of very poor liquidity in the small company market in general. We've seen the tech market pick up. We've certainly seen the healthcare sector pick up quite strongly. And I think, okay, the mining sector is still bumping along the bottom. I think there's a chance that if we're seeing what I would describe as sector rotation, hopefully the mining sector will start to pick up. And we're seeing more Fed Reserve comments on cutting interest rates. As interest rates get cut, as the US dollar weakens, we should start to see commodity prices rise. We should start to see the mining guys go better.
And you think that will outweigh the issues with China, the lack of growth?
I think there is going to be ongoing growth in China. The Chinese government is not about to go negative in growth terms.
Yeah. We have to understand. Still growth.
It might not grow as fast as it has been, but I don't think that's going to be an enormous problem. Okay, there is a problem in the housing market, but I think the Chinese government is big enough and bad enough to fix it.
Yeah, well, they're bad enough. Right. Thanks for that, Johnny boy. Have a nice weekend. What are you doing? Sunbathing, and hopefully we'll catch up next week.
Look forward to it, Justin. Thank you.